What's up, boys? Class 404, the refined video essay complainer, back with a little change up for you guys. Instead of focusing solely on Bungie, which we've been discussing a lot lately, with this one, we're going to take a leap into all this world has to offer. There's so many games to complain about. Why limit myself to just one? So today, we're going to be discussing an old friend who may have slipped up and revealed something that could unveil what's been wrong with the whole AAA space for the last 10 years. So let's get into it. This bombshell comes from our old pals back at Activision Blizzard. If you're a well-adjusted human being, which likely makes up 0.001% of people who clicked on this video, you'd need to be brought up to speed with all that's going wrong with their latest dookie sandwich, Diablo 4. Now, since I'm still a homeless man, moonlighting as a YouTuber, I don't have any editors or writers. This is all brought to you authentic and al dente from yours truly, live from the janitor closet of your local McDonald's. This being the case, I haven't had the means or the time to play Diablo 4 between making this content for you guys, eating discarded McChicken wrappers,
too much goddamn mayonnaise,
and throwing frozen hamburgers on the roof. With my lack of personal experience, we'll go ahead and take a look at how the release has been for the rest of the community. Yeah, I'd say things haven't exactly been going too great lately. Apparently making players weaker rather than stronger makes the game suck. Who would have guessed that? But as much as I want to rag on poor balancing changes, that isn't exactly what we're all gathered here for today. Nah, today is reserved for a much bigger issue. This one tweet. Balancing changes aren't the only thing Diablo fans have been griping over. Another pretty significant issue is inventory space, or the lack thereof. Developers recently announced that they'd be adding one more stash tab to allow players to carry just a bit more loot with them into the open world of Diablo 4. And our Scandinavian friend here thought up a brilliant question to ask after the announcement. But why are we only getting one extra stash tab? What is the problem to add a load more of them, or even unlimited? A pretty fair question, all things considered. It took the community all banding together just to get one stash tab. It'll be difficult to get enough people to have Blizzard listen when inventories get clogged further down the road. Why not just solve the problem right now and save everybody the time? Well, Joseph Piapiora, as much as I'd like to call him PP, we'll just stick with Joe moving forward. Mr. Joe here, who works for the dev team, has our answer. When we say they are expensive, what we mean is that they create a lot of memory overhead. When you see another player in-game, you load them and their entire stash filled with items.
Oh my god! What the fuck? Who thought this was a good idea? Like, how do you make this decision? This is insane. And you know what I love is the fact that everybody always thinks that, oh, well, you can't just fix it. Like, there's some elaborately woven tapestry that's been created by only the greatest minds in engineering that the world can afford. That Blizzard has put this together as this fucking, this house of cards that, if they put one extra card, the whole thing falls apart. And then they finally fucking explain why they can't do it, and it's the dumbest goddamn thing that you've ever heard.
And I'd say that about sums it up. Leave it to the balding multimillionaire to touch on everything I was thinking within the first 60 seconds of reading it. He even goes on to pose the question of whether this problem affects World of Warcraft, Blizzard's other MMO. I think you might have heard of it. But as soon as those words left his lips, alarm bells went off in my wrinkle-free noggin. This isn't an isolated incident. There has to be more to this. But before we start looking into other games, we should try to figure out how something like this becomes an issue at all. I managed to source a Blizzard response from April of 2019 discussing why stash tabs couldn't be added to Diablo 3, a title that released a little over a decade ago. This Blizzard reply mirrors Joe's tweet, however in this case they are discussing consoles primarily. As for the disparity with consoles specifically, additional stash space can impact things like game loading time negatively, as well as by lowering the amount of new space, we can make sure console players still get more stash, but that gameplay experience doesn't suffer from it. These two quotes allow us to be fairly certain that they're talking about the same memory issue, but now the next part not only confirms this, but adds a little sauce. Most objects in the game are actors, special effects, enemies, summons, followers, and items. Gems, weapons, armors, potions, pets, crafting materials, and more. All the things we love to hoard. All players in a party sync on everything that every player has in memory all the time. That doesn't sound like a lot at first, but it adds up very fast. The more actors active in the game, like enemies on screen and items in your stash, the more the game will tax your system's memory. Listen, I could have made excuses for things like armor, weapons, and pets. Things that affect gameplay and damage calculations directly make sense to have running all the time in combat zones. In fact, this is what I was assuming when I first read Joe's tweet. But you're trying to tell me that crafting materials have to constantly run up memory? You gotta be fucking kidding me. But there's something even more delusional about this whole situation. Blizzard has known this was a problem since the launch of the previous game 11 years ago, maybe even before. 6 years later, they go to start developing the next Diablo title, and no one in charge thought to themselves, we're adding more multiplayer elements to the new game. Maybe that issue caused by multiplayer loading states should be fixed before we start adding these new features. Not one person in charge said, stop the fucking train, one of the cars is on fire, stop it now while we can still get it under control. What would it have taken? Another week? Another month? Another year? How much time would be too much to ensure that the next game, a game scheduled to have a nearly 10-year life cycle, doesn't have to deal with this same problem for the entirety of its lifetime? But no, player enjoyment isn't a measurable statistic you can present to a board of directors. Shareholders can see improvements in graphical fidelity, they can be shown statistics for core processing efficiency and total playable hours and all that other nonsense. If you spend a month fixing a processing method to add more longevity to the way the game interprets things, to all those boomers, it's gonna sound like a giant waste of their money. And it's not just the geriatrics sitting on their couch, letting Jim Cramer tell them Peloton is a golden bull. It's us too. Or at least the corporation's perception of us. The head honchos want to see new gameplay features because that's what they think we want. Add an open world, add world bosses, add features to the character creation, add mounts, all visible changes. But here's the truth. Skyrim, released back in 2011. It's been 12 years from its official launch. Some people still play the fuck out of it to this day. If Bethesda just took Skyrim's essentials, made a new map and new questing architecture, and launched that shit back in 2016, do you think players would have been upset? Through the modding scene, players have managed to make a decade-old game look just as stunning as a modern title. And that's if you weren't creating any new assets in the process. There's an entire project run by several different teams of modders that's been doing just this for several years now, taking donations and paying out of pocket just to make this happen. If a game is good, with some noticeable flaws, don't expand upon it until those flaws are ground out. Look at Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Dark Souls 3 was a masterclass in game design. All the problems with Dark Souls 2, throw them in the garbage. Whether you like the game or not, the quantity over quality approach hurt the game as a whole. Dark Souls 3 stuck to a simple track, introducing badass characters and tough as hell enemies, just like the series is known for. Then they refined the combat to make it feel more fluid and enjoyable. Boom. Fantastic game people will come back to 10 years from now. Then they moved on to expansion, taking their perfected concept and putting it in a larger setting. If you don't have to worry about tweaking things in the underlying structure, that really opens up opportunities to make something magical. And goddamn was Elden Ring magical. But what's the one problem I hear people complain about with regards to Elden Ring? Laggy multiplayer. This was the only problem that wasn't completely fixed in Dark Souls 3, and look what wound up happening in the next game. Now, I'm sure multiplayer was not From Software's #1 priority, but it leaves a blemish on what would otherwise be a perfect game. And for another example, look to my hometown of Destiny 2. Players had plenty to gripe about with Destiny 1, so what did Bungie do? They made players weaker, just like the Diablo team. Then made the story and gameplay worse. The following expansions did nothing to change this, and the game nearly took the eternal nap in cyberspace right alongside the once proclaimed Destiny killer Anthem. Little did they know, the only people who could kill Destiny was the Destiny team themselves. Same with Cyberpunk and the spaghetti code atrocity that is the Red Engine, or pretty much all of Crackdown 3. Instead of doing boring chore work that is fixing the problems with your previous games, they chose to jump into a bunch of new features and ideas, and that chore work came right back around to bite both sets of developers right on the ass. Ambition is a perfectly fine thing, but it needs to be used in the right way and for the right reasons. We don't actually care about graphical fidelity or more character creation options, though those things are certainly nice to have. Focus on the essentials. How does the game play? If it plays like shit, then we all know where it belongs. So there you have it. To all the CEOs out there making games worse, word to your mother. And for the rest of you fuckers, I hope you have a great day. Don't forget to tip your bartender by leaving a like, and if you're feeling frisky, a sub. And I'll see you on the next one.